Forever Spooky on YouTube.
I had been unemployed for months, and my bank account was running dangerously low. I had applied to countless jobs, but either my qualifications weren't up to par, or the positions were already filled. Just when I was about to lose hope, I saw an advertisement. It was a security guard position, at the local cemetery. At first, I was hesitant. The thought of working in a cemetery was unsettling, but the salary was decent, and the job was only part-time, so I wouldn't be spending too much time there. I applied for the job and was quickly hired. On my first day, I arrived at the cemetery as the sun was setting. The manager, a middle-aged man named Greg, gave me a tour of the grounds and explained my duties. I was to patrol the cemetery at night, making sure no one was trespassing or causing damage to the graves. As Greg handed me my keys and left for the night, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled in my stomach. The cemetery was vast and old, with tombstones dating back to the 1800s. The trees cast eerie shadows on the grass, and the sound of rustling leaves made me jump at every noise. As the weeks passed, my job became routine. I patrolled the cemetery, made sure the gates were locked, and reported any suspicious activity. But as time went on, strange things began to happen. I would often hear footsteps behind me, but when I turned around, no one was there. The sound of whispers and weeping would echo through the cemetery, and sometimes, I would see shadowy figures lurking in the distance. I tried to brush it off as my imagination, but the occurrences became more frequent. One night, I was doing my rounds, when I heard a strange noise coming from one of the grave sites. I shined my flashlight on the grave and saw a figure hunched over, digging at the dirt, with bare hands. "Hey! What are you doing?" I shouted while running over. The figure slowly turned around, revealing a face, caked in dirt and mud. Its eyes were sunken in, and its skin was pale and sallow. It was a man, but he looked like he had been buried alive. I'm looking for my son," he mumbled, his voice raspy and weak. I helped the man up and called the police, who discovered that the man's son had been buried in that grave months ago. The man had been plotting for weeks to dig out his son's body. That incident shook me to my core. I tried to quit my job, but Greg dissuaded me. He said that I was the only reliable security guard, and that the job was mine, for as long as I wanted it. I continued working at the cemetery, but the eerie feeling never left. I saw things that I couldn't explain, heard noises that made my skin crawl. I felt trapped, like I was stuck in a never-ending nightmare. Every night, I patrolled the cemetery with a sense of dread, never knowing what I would encounter next. Then, one night, I saw a group of people walking through the cemetery. They were dressed in dark robes, and their faces were obscured by hoods. They were chanting in a language that I didn't understand, and as they approached, I could feel a cold, ominous energy emanating from them. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew that I had to get out of there, but I didn't know where to go. The group of people had me surrounded, and I could feel their breath on my face. I closed my eyes, bracing for whatever was about to happen. But then, I heard a voice that I recognized. It was Greg. "What the hell are you guys doing?" he shouted. The group of people dispersed, disappearing into the night. Greg helped me to my feet, and explained that they were a cult that had been trying to conduct a ritual in the cemetery. He had been aware of their presence for a while, but hadn't wanted to alarm me. I quit my job the next day, and even though Greg pleaded for me to stay, I knew that I couldn't go back. The experience had left me traumatized, and I couldn't help but feel that something was following me, even when I was far away. Months later, I heard news that Greg had been arrested for involvement in the cult. He had been using the cemetery as a meeting place for the group, and had even been partaken in some of their rituals. It was a chilling realization. I had been working at the cemetery with someone who was involved in the occult, someone who had put my life in danger. I still have nightmares about my time at the cemetery, and sometimes, I still feel like something is watching me from the dark.
Forever Spooky on YouTube.
Last week, I attended my grandfather's funeral, and it was a surreal experience. I had grown up in a tough neighborhood with a broken family, and my grandfather had been the only constant in my life. He had always been around, and his death had left me with a deep sense of loss. As I approached the gravesite, I saw a group of people standing in the back, all dressed in black. I didn't recognize any of them, but they all looked at me with a mixture of sadness and curiosity. During the service, I heard whispers coming from the group. They were talking about my grandfather, but they were saying things that didn't quite add up. They talked about his past, about secrets he had kept hidden from me all these years. As the service ended, I approached the group and introduced myself. It was then that I learned that they were my grandfather's relatives, people I had never known existed. They told me that my grandfather had grown up in a different part of town, with a different family. They told me about his past, about how he had left that life behind, to start a new one with my grandmother. I felt a deep sense of remorse. All these years, I had known my grandfather as a kind and loving man, but now I realized that there was so much I didn't know about him. I felt like I had missed out on the opportunity to know him better, to understand the ups and downs of his life. In the weeks that followed, I dug deeper into my grandfather's past, trying to piece together the missing parts of his life. I learned about his struggles, his heartaches, and his triumphs. It was a bittersweet experience, one that brought both regret and a newfound appreciation for the man who had meant so much to me. One day, as I walked down a deserted street, I heard footsteps behind me, and a familiar voice whisper my name. I turned around, but no one was there. That night, I had a surreal dream about my grandfather. He looked at me with sorrow in his eyes, and talked about the secrets he had kept hidden from me, about the pain he had endured throughout his life. He told me that he had been trying to reach out to me, to tell me the truth about his life, but he had never been able to find the right moment. As his ghostly form started to fade away, I felt a sense of regret. I wished that I had known the truth about his life when he was alive, that I could have been there for him, in his time of need. But then, something strange happened. My grandfather's ghostly form started to solidify, and I realized that he wasn't disappearing, but rather, he was coming back to life. He looked at me and smiled, and I realized that he was at peace, that he had finally found the closure he had been seeking. I woke up with tears streaming down my face. In the days that followed, I was able to confirm that the things he told me were true. I knew that it wasn't just a dream. I felt a newfound sense of purpose. Attending my grandfather's funeral had been a sad and eerie experience, but it had also given me the chance to connect with a part of my family that I had never known existed. It had opened my eyes to a new world of possibilities, but it had also left me with a sense of sadness for all the missed opportunities to truly know and understand my grandfather.
Like, comment, and subscribe for more Forever Spooky.